There are 1,000 signs, 500 before he comes to earth and 500 after we are here with him. All 500 are fulfilled. So this is a lame excuse when you say 2 Peter 2:3. This is you, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days.
You need to detox your mind from what other people have said about you. People have spoken negative things over you.
This
This website, though, is their Christian identity, so it's false. But the point is that this is a cultic symbol, and these different ministries use it like as a signal or some sort.
By in 1217, called Judah ben Solomon, said, I had a vision about Elijah. And he outlined history from 1217 until 2017.
For there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers, especially they of the circumcision, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole houses, teaching things which they ought not, for filthy lucre's sake.
Jerusalem, and that's what we're talking about now, the sticky point, Jerusalem. And he said, and the Jubilee is 50 years, the celebration within Israel and the Jewish people. And he said there will be 6 Jubilees. 6 times 50 is 300 years.
Four dimensions, not 3. And yet we know that there's 6 others. Particle physics tells us that, and the ancient sage Nachmanides, in his commentary in Genesis, published that in the 12th century. There are at least 10 dimensions. The scientific papers are full of conjectures about the string theory, and 10 or 11. There's some mathematical implications, but all of this. The net of it is that there are 6 dimensions that we know are there, but we can't experience directly. Should we be surprised that the Bible talks about a spiritual world that is the superset of the world we experience? We are in a subset.
We believe, though we cannot yet prove, that our multiverse of universes is 11-dimensional.
We're in a digital simulation.
This is the construct.
In any case, that's what we're talking about here.
This isn't real.
What is real?
There are bubbles that float.
The people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, or maybe even a diaspora if you want, and unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. Here's a little diagram that's important. It is not to scale, by the way, but we have verse 25, 26, and 27. Verse 24 was the scope of the whole thing.
But there's what we call a premillennial chart. A premillennial chart is a chart that rightly divides the word of truth.
Verse 25 we took last time. The 69 weeks consisted of 7 plus 62, remember? That's why when I say after 62, I'm really saying after the 69. Do you follow me? That's not a contrivance, you just see it or you don't, okay. The 7th week is yet, that's going to be dealt with in verse 27. So we're in verse 26, which deals with an interval between these two, during which the Messiah is karat, executed. That's not the triumphal entry, that was 4 days earlier. That was on the 10th of Nisan, when in the temple.
This is Buck Williams reporting live from Israel. I am standing in the middle of an all-out attack. The sun is gone. Thousands of planes are soaring overhead. Fire is raining from the sky. This is just unbelievable.
A blood moon is when the earth comes between the sun and the moon. And the sun is shining through the atmosphere of the earth and cast upon the moon a red shadow. And so the moon appears to be red. The sun and the moon and the earth are controlled by God Almighty. He is the one that's getting them in a direct alignment on a certain day, at a certain time, but each time it's a Passover or Sukkot. I believe that in these next 2 years, we're going to see something dramatic happen in the Middle East involving Israel that will change the course of history in the Middle East and impact the whole world.
This has got to be the biggest surprise attack since Pearl Harbor. I've been informed.
Why does this chick have the mark, like some sort of mark on her forehead or something?
Informed by top-ranking military officials that Israel has been unable to launch even a single plane in defense.
Buck would have filmed Hiroshima from ground zero if he'd been there.
Yeah, that's our Buck.
As I stand here, fighter planes are exploding in midair. They're crashing and falling to the ground without any explanation. And while no one can seem to give me any reason for why this is happening, I can tell you this. This all-out, unprecedented attempt to destroy Israel appears to be failing.
So, see, in this Left Behind movie, they're trying to sell the dispensational lie, and so the way they're trying to portray the biblical worldview to the world is like, oh, it's the Christians and Israel, you know, the unsaved Israel, you know, they have a special covenant with God, you know, the new covenant doesn't, in other words, forget about the new covenant, is what they're saying. So he's saying that they're attacking, like before, this in their made up story is before their made up rapture. So they're saying, like maybe they're saying it's the Ezekiel 30, in their eschatology, Ezekiel 38, Gog and Magog war is the Muslims and the Russians coming to attack Israel, and then they so in other words, they're showing in this movie that God is supernaturally protecting them because the planes are falling out of the sky, even though they're so in this dispensation, this movie, they're saying like, there's an attack coming against Israel, and like God is supernaturally protecting Israel. In other words.
War will continue until the end. Desolations have been decreed. You will confirm a covenant with many for 7 years.
Number one, this guy's supposed to be one of the 2 witnesses, and then he's misrepresenting comprehending, or what's the word? Misinterpreting the verse in Daniel 9:27, so that there's a future 70th week. That's the big part of the scam, is that there is no future 70th week. This is also that they can make this say there's another program, and the new covenant doesn't exist anymore in this made up period, is what they're saying. And so in the movie, they're giving you false interpretations. And now Kirk Cameron is like, oh, I'm not pre-trib rapture anymore, I'm post-trib. But see, Kirk Cameron is not explaining about the 2 programs. He's just saying, oh, well, I just went from here to here. You know, he still believes the same stuff.
Also, the city and the sanctuary are destroyed by the people of the Prince that shall come. Now, we know that happened in 70 AD. So we know this interval from the text alone has to include at least 38 years. But it's been, since we know that verse 27 hasn't started yet, I'm going to argue that this has lasted for over 1970 years. It's astonishing to realize how many churches are totally obtuse to the role of Israel in the future. In fact, they embrace a concept that's called replacement theology. What that labels is the idea that because Israel rejected her Messiah, the promises that were on Israel fall upon the church. And that's what church has replaced Israel is the concept. That happens to be an unfortunate heresy.
Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor.
For several reasons. It causes a lot of confusion, but more than that, it tends to make God a liar.
Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor.
You want in your own study, not because I'm telling you this, I want you in your own study to come to your own conclusions, explore the possibility of distinctions between Israel and the church. They're different. They have different origins. They have different missions, actually, and certainly very different destinies. The replacement views that you sometimes hear from many pulpits deny Israel's place in God's program.
Chapter 8. Now of the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such an high priest, who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary, and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched, and not man. For every high priest is ordained to offer gifts and sacrifices, wherefore it is of necessity that this man have somewhat also to offer. For if he were on earth, he should not be a priest, seeing that there are priests that offer gifts according to the law, who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. For see, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern shewed to thee in the mount. But now hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind, and write them in their hearts. And I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. In that he saith, A new covenant, he hath made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away.
And one of the rebuttals to this is Paul, in his definitive statement of Christian doctrine we call the book of Romans, hammers away for 3 chapters, 9, 10, and 11, that God is not finished with Israel, they have a destiny. We need to understand what it is if we're going to make any sense out of God's plan of redemption. The 70-week prophecy specifically deals with Israel, not the church. Gabriel made that very clear right up front. And you notice in the New Testament period, the church period, Paul deals with 3 categories: Jews, Gentiles, and the church. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 32 is an example of that.
That's a lie. There's only, in the dispensational worldview, they have, the church, the unsaved, and the Jews. Instead of, the real world, it's the saved and the unsaved. And then the saved are Jews and Christians. If you're unsaved, it doesn't matter what your race is. It doesn't matter what your race is if you're saved.